Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Harm Reduction Report. You are here with your pal Cal, and I'm along here with Willard TeaBelly. Welcome, Will.
Well,
how you doing out there?
Good to be here in the wilderness. Thank you. Yes, I'm doing good. So, like you know, I just saw you yesterday. Was it yesterday? 2 days ago.
2 days ago.
In the big city, a G-Funk.
Yep.
And I don't know if you wanted to explain it, but we had an unfortunate situation of losing the recording we made. We actually sat down together in person.
I know, such a bummer. We brought it all back home to Grand Forks. We were all hanging out, sitting across the table, face to face, doing an episode, and we had special guest Maura TeaBelly. Is that her?
Maura Wilder.
Maura Wilder, yeah. She was with us, and it was a fun, fluid episode, and it was such a great honor to sit there across the table with you and chat with you. But yes, unfortunately, the recording was lost. It's not the end of the world, but we'll just kind of go with the flow. And so now here, it's a different kind of honor to be on the phone with you, having another episode of the Harm Reduction Report.
I'm glad that I found some self-service out here, so we could do this record a call.
Me too. Yeah, I'm happy to have you here. It proves very difficult to do those monologues that you somehow flow through. You do really well with those monologues.
Oh man, I wouldn't say flow through like it's really easy or something. It's a big struggle.
Yeah.
And I can relate to your pain if that's what you were feeling. Trying to do something alone yesterday, but
yeah, geez, my head was just I don't know. It's hard to stay on course when it's just me and my thoughts, because my thoughts just kind of bouncing around here and there, different topics, and it's definitely a blessing to have you.
It's easier to know when you sound like you're talking out of your butt, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
When you have a friend with you.
They bring you back on course, keep you in line, that's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned you're out there in the wilderness. What are you up to? You picking berries and stuff like that?
In my hand right now, there are two kinds of berries. Both of them are blue and small and round. One of them is poisonous.
Okay.
And will cause a person's throat to swell up and suffocate them to death. And the other is a blueberry, which will do nothing but bring absolute joy and wonder.
And health, yes.
And health, yeah.
How similar do they look?
Well, the color is basically the exact same, but they look definitely different. The blueberry, everybody knows a blueberry is small, almost like a little mini tomato, it's got that little patch on top, kind of.
Yep.
And it's squishy, and it's kind of the shape of a little tomato. The other one is almost like a perfect sphere. And it's at the end, it's on these little stems that stick straight out, and it's totally on the end, sitting on top of the little stems. And the blueberries usually are kind of all over on the wobbly stems that come out of the blueberry plant.
Okay.
So they look different, but they each have sort of a little patch or a little dimple on them. But if you don't know what you're looking at, you can totally understand how somebody would make a mistake and eat the wrong one. Especially since these blue poison berries, which actually I don't know the name of them, I know it starts with a C. I wish my friend Louie were here to identify them right now. But they're growing right next to all the blueberries.
Oh, okay.
So mistakes could definitely happen.
Sure.
To an uneducated or unprepared human being.
Yeah. I hear an analogy coming. A comparison. A harm reduction comparison.
Well, yes. Compare this metaphor to, say, illicit substances. Or anything else, any other kind of substances. If you don't know what it is, you can take the wrong thing. So,
yeah, easily.
In this world, I had my good friend Louie educate me ahead of time to prevent the problem. He told me sincerely, this one has effects A, B, and Z, the blueberry. And the other one has these certain but serious differences. And if he hadn't been there to sincerely educate me, I may have been so inclined to try the poisonous one.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a berry looks like a berry, and to go on with this metaphor, I think you mentioned one time the documentary What's in My Bag.
Yeah.
Is that the one? Yeah. And so this berry metaphor really stresses the importance of, like you mentioned, that accurate education, having that accurate knowledge and being aware that there are things that look similar or maybe behave similarly, but can do entirely different things. Where I'm going with this is, again, with, stressing the substance testing kits.
Right. If we had a substance testing kit that, a reagent liquid, say, that would turn a certain color or give you a certain distinct reaction upon the connect with blueberry juices, then I would know. I could test both of these things. I could squeeze them out, and it would tell me which one contains real blueberries and which one doesn't.
Yep.
Or perhaps the chemical would look for the poison and turn a certain color if it detects the poison, and do nothing with real blueberries.
Thereby saving the life of a human being.
Possibly. Yeah. Thankfully, these look much different, really. I mean, they're pretty similar, but you can definitely tell one's not a blueberry just looking at it. Unfortunately, that is not the situation with most chemicals, the illicit chemicals and the dangerous substances we're talking about. You can't tell at all. And in fact, in most cases, when there's overdose involved, what happened was somebody tried very hard to make the poisonous thing look like the real thing. Deliberately. These plants out here, I don't think they're trying to trick us.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But they make it pretty obvious, at least to an informed community, to inform their people which ones not to eat. Thankfully, they're not so malicious as certain substance dealers are to deliberately disguise one as the other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important. Those substance testing kits are important. And, I mean, we've stressed it on the show several times before, but I think it's something that oftentimes gets overlooked. I mean, people acknowledge, like, yeah, substance testing kit would be ideal, and I ought to get one, but I wonder what percentage of people actually go out and get one and actually use it. Probably not nearly enough.
Right. We've talked about the limitations of these kits a lot.
Yeah.
And there are many limitations of them, and they can be fooled a lot. See, if these plants out here were really trying to trick us, and eventually they knew that we were testing the poisonous ones, or testing all the berries we eat to look for the poisonous ones, eventually they could decide to put just a little bit of real blueberry juice into the poison berries, so that it would fool our tests, like, yes, indeed, the blueberry is present here, and then we'd eat them and still be poisoned.
Yep. And that's what happens in the world of illicit substances, when there is no accountability that is required by a malicious drug dealer, as you mentioned. They don't always abide by those ethical, moral standards. It's more about, like, selling a product, which is one of the issues I have with prohibition and the legal status of these illicit drugs. It's one of the reasons I'm so enthusiastic and so excited about this turn in the ideas related to cannabis.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think we are indeed seeing such a turn. I believe just recently in the Grand Forks Herald, there was a survey published, the results of a survey published, where we should have it right in front of us, I guess. Maybe you don't have it in front of you, do you?
I don't have it in front of me, but I know I saw some that were not completed. They weren't finalized, but I know at one point I saw 78% of people in the poll that responded to the poll were in support of the full legalization of cannabis, marijuana, full legalization of marijuana.
North Dakota.
In North Dakota, yep.
Yeah.
And that's 6,000 people responded to that survey, which is that's a big number. That creates a representative sample. You know, if 6,000 people are responding to a survey, that is that tells me that a huge percentage of people truly are in favor of legalization of cannabis.
Yes. And if Maura were here, she'd be able to calculate the p-value of that statistical significance and tell us exactly how significant that is. But it sounds really good. 6,000 people in North Dakota responded, and 78% of them said they are in favor of recreational marijuana being passed in North Dakota. See, what I love about this now is realizing that and totally understanding and respecting and digging the fact that probably not all of those people, I would guess, maybe even like most of them, have no intentions themselves of necessarily, buying recreational marijuana or ever using it.
Right.
But what it says is they are for it enough to allow those who need it or really want it the opportunity to decide for themselves. Give them the chance to obtain it if they need it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the way it ought to be. Free market, just the freedom of choice, put the responsibility on the individual and allow them to choose. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's like what our country was founded on, really. Those are sort of some of the founding principles of our country. So I'm very excited to see it. Also this number, the 78% approval rating, shows a huge decrease in the stigma related to cannabis. It shows that people are opening their minds and thinking about, cannabis and what that means to people, and, do people deserve to be criminalized and locked up for cannabis usage and denied financial aid and things like that. So it's very encouraging. I'm so excited to see that turn.
It has enough signatures, so it will be on the ballot in November. Is that right?
Yes. So there was, in order to get it onto the ballot, there was a requirement of 13,456 signatures, I believe, across the state of North Dakota, and the people petitioning far outdid themselves. They submitted something around 18,000 signatures. So the way they're going to finalize it is by, I think this is how it works. I'm not entirely sure, but so they go through the signatures and they randomly pick a signature from each packet and send out a card in the mail, and to someone who signed the petition, and if that card gets sent back to the original mailer, then that signature is authorized or approved, confirmed, and I think they get a general percentage of approvals based on that.
Another p-value and another statistical significance calculation to be done there.
Yeah, basically by taking a small sample of the signatures and seeing like how many respond.
They do that calculation, I assume, they make some kind of assumption about how many people they expect to respond.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not everyone. I mean, even assuming they are real people who actually sign the petition, I bet not everybody who gets sent a card sends it back for probably a number of reasons. I don't know.
So I don't know how exactly that works. I'm not entirely sure how many, like if someone doesn't send a card back, does that mean that one signature is invalidated, or does it mean that the entire packet is invalidated? I can't imagine that they would invalidate an entire packet because of that. But it sounds like the people that are at the top of this petition and doing all the footwork and doing a lot of the work are very confident that it will be put onto the ballot.
Okay. Well, that's cool. And I remember in our recording this weekend that got lost, one thing we were talking about was the need to go far, far out of our way to keep a sincere tone when we're talking about any of these things. No matter what opinion you are of in regards to this or any other topic, we on the Harm Reduction Report have spoken many times about our love of sincerity and how if we lose that, then we lose the connection with people, and we'll end up just polarizing everyone instead of bringing anyone together on these issues. Do you remember, was it 2 years ago or more, there were a petition going around to put marijuana on the ballot? I forget what kind of marijuana on the ballot.
Medical, yeah.
Okay, was it during that process when some of the signatures were found to be fraudulent?
Yeah. Oh, was it?
I believe, yeah.
I think that might have been medical then, yeah.
It might have been even before, like 4 years ago or something.
Oh, okay.
Because I remember the story being something along the lines of college students in North Dakota were going around collecting signatures, and they were somehow found out to be faking signatures.
Okay, yeah.
And, this set, I think the story was that it set the whole thing back by like another cycle, another election cycle.
Mm-hmm.
It couldn't get on the ballot once that happened. And yeah, whether that's the whole story or not, I don't remember. I should have looked that up too before we chatted. But imagine such a thing, and imagine the damage that would do to the people who now are collecting signatures.
Yeah, it kind of damages the credibility a little bit.
Right. And it would be strange. I could see some people having a radio show about this who are super excited about legal marijuana, and they, definitely want it to pass, and now they're having this conversation before the election, and they might not even bring up that story of the past. Mm-hmm. They might assume that makes them look bad, right?
Right.
Even if they're sort of not, even if they themselves are doing it honestly.
Right.
And I just felt like bringing it up right now, even if I had a couple of the details wrong. I hope I didn't.
Good. Yeah, good. I'm glad you brought it up. That's part of, like, assessing. That's something that happened. That's a truth that happened. And, to touch on the sincerity aspect, you mentioned in the very beginning, at the very first episode, we want to strive for sincerity and acknowledge as much as we can. And if something like that is a truth that happened, that deserves acknowledgement. It deserves discussion, and we, as attempting to be sincere people, ought to address those kinds of things. So I'm glad you mentioned it.
It would be a lot like, I don't know, think of some other example for someone of a different opinion, having a fact of, being told that, marijuana has not as bad health consequences as people used to think or something, and then ignoring that statistic or just not mentioning that story because it might make their side, their perceived side, seem bad or look bad or something.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want people in that situation to make that choice. And we wouldn't want people, to make that other situation, to do that thing either. We gotta be honest. We gotta be totally open with each other if we're actually trying to come up with the best answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one that I see often is, I've seen a couple, I never read through the methods and everything like that of these studies, but I have seen a couple research studies connecting the early onset of things like schizophrenia to cannabis use. If someone that has like a predisposition, a genetic predisposition to something like schizophrenia, I've seen some studies state that it can precipitate in advance some of those problems.
Right.
But then I've also seen other studies that say the exact opposite. So it gets kind of difficult. It becomes ambiguous. It's a little bit unclear, but definitely, we ought to acknowledge those things, and, to be true harm reduction people, it's important that people know that cannabis may very well precipitate the early onset of something like schizophrenia in someone that has a predisposition to it. That's harm reduction. Right. Letting people know that.
Yeah. When educating about these things, that should be something that's said. I remember my AP psychology class in high school at Red River High School in good old G-Funk.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it so much I bought the textbook. I don't know why, but our teacher convinced almost the whole class to buy the textbook at the end of the class because people just loved that class so much, and it's probably Mr. Carney. He was one of the favorites at the time.
Okay.
And and people liked it, so we bought the book. I still have it, and I flipped through it not too long ago, and I saw it again, and I just thought of it when you mentioned the thing about schizophrenia, because I remember in that class meeting someone with schizophrenia, and he came into our class and talked to us. And I don't, honestly remember what it said about drugs. I remember the classifications. I remember one thing interesting that the textbook did was it didn't classify marijuana into the normal classifications it had there. I believe it was listing like hallucinogens, and it had LSD and stuff like that, and stimulants, and it had cocaine and blah blah blah. Depressants, there's alcohol and this and that, and marijuana was sort of in its other category, and I remember it explained it's sort of a mixture that it can almost be many different things. It's like a stimulant, but also kind of a hallucinogen, but also basically neither of those.
And also sometimes a depressant.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen it classified in many different ways. My favorite one is to see it, like you mentioned, just off on its own little group. It is marijuana. It isn't necessarily a depressant, a stimulant, or a hallucinogen.
Right. I don't think it fits the definitions for those things fully.
Yeah, I think most accurately, it's on its own. It's in its own little unique category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember really what else I learned about it in high school from the health class or something. I remember in health class we did this thing where we wore the drunk goggles.
Okay.
You ever do that?
No, I never did that.
At Red River, they put these goggles on our head, and it messed with your perception.
Okay.
And it was kind of saying, like, this is what it's like to be truly hammered drunk. And then they had us do things, like try to walk across the room and, like, pick up your book and walk back. And it was really hard to do. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, and it was making the argument, like, you shouldn't drive your car when you're drunk because it would be something like this.
I was going to say, it almost sounds fun. It sounds like a fun little challenge, which maybe is maybe a little bit counterproductive. But yeah, to get the point across, like, it is inebriating, it is intoxicating, and it can change your perception, and you definitely should not drive.
Because maybe it was a little fun, and maybe some of us afterwards were like, we should try this sometime.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You're like associate a good time.
But clearly it made the point that, like, yeah, if any of us were taking it seriously, it made the point that, yeah, you're not going to want to drive when you're doing that, or doing anything else where you need some motor skills or some comprehension ability.
Mhm. Yeah, I think cannabis ought to be the same way. I've heard people say that, like, that it's fine driving on cannabis, and it's less intoxicating than alcohol. And I think people that have never done cannabis or that are worried about the legalization of cannabis take concern with that, and rightfully so. I definitely think cannabis falls in the category of one of those drugs that should not be consumed while driving. There are exceptions to that rule, like caffeine. Caffeine is a drug, and I mean that doesn't, for whatever reason, inebriate people in the same way that alcohol would.
Yeah. I do have one friend who told me a story of how she was taking a lot of caffeine and eventually started taking caffeine pills.
Okay.
And was driving once on the interstate to Fargo and had taken some caffeine pills and then suddenly woke up in the ditch. Actually, like, on the other side of the interstate. Like, had gone through the ditch and ended up on the road on the other side, the northbound lane.
Jeez.
Driving south. And this was caffeine. Now, most people aren't taking caffeine pills.
Right.
And I assume she, overdid it.
Yeah, sounds like it.
like you said, most people are drinking coffee on their way to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually not a problem. So it sort of depends.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I mean, it could become like, I don't know, you don't want people driving around intoxicated on caffeine like that either if they overdid it.
No.
Right, yeah. But you enforcing that no caffeine while driving rule would be impossible, really.
That'd be interesting. Maybe they'd throw a lot of people in jail for it.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a situation where it comes down to individual responsibility, really, and sort of education, like sincere education, and making sure people know that you can pass out or you can have these sort of blackout type of things if you're taking caffeine pills in excess, and
Right.
So yeah, education.
The blood alcohol content measure seems to be a really good measure it's a proxy, right? I mean, the blood alcohol content in your blood actually doesn't directly show you how drunk or intoxicated or inebriated or unable to drive you are.
Right.
But it's a really good indicator. For the most part, if you have X amount BAC, we can know that you're not going to be able to safely drive a car.
Right.
So it's kind of nice that we have that convenient thing. And also, it's like you can test it immediately. You can test someone right now.
Yes.
And find out. So it probably that's a pretty good measure. There's not an equivalent test, say, for marijuana that can so certainly tell you how intoxicated someone is.
David Owen mentioned this to me. He told me this, that they're doing a strip that, like an oral swab, that can detect if someone has consumed or smoked cannabis, if they've smoked it at least in the last 3 hours.
Okay.
So that would be a little bit more helpful.
It seems so, but it's not the same as the BAC, is it? Because
right. No, it's not.
Does it say how much the person smokes?
Right.
And I think marijuana is a different substance, so much so that even if one person smokes the same, they may not be as intoxicated as someone else.
Yeah.
Whereas with alcohol, you pretty much know. If you had X number of drinks, you know you're too intoxicated. I think the BAC usually can tell you that.
Yeah.
With a pretty high confidence I guess I don't know what the answer is, but would it be ideal if all driving sobriety tests had something to do with your performance, like a field sobriety test? You actually try to do a physical test right now, and it didn't necessarily matter what your BAC is or what the marijuana BAC is.
That's interesting.
If it was a performance test, you can pass the test or you can't, and that tells us if you're inebriated right now or
Yeah,
not.
I wonder if that would be ideal.
I don't know.
Superior.
I don't know.
It would maybe be more general, like you mentioned, when it comes to alcohol, a specific percentage of alcohol in your blood can be like blanket, in general, like determines for most people how physically inebriated they are or physically incapable of driving they are. But as you mentioned, for other substances, it's maybe not as clear. So maybe when it comes to other substances, the performance test would be ideal. I don't know. It's a tricky question. It's something that will have to be addressed. I imagine, do you know what they're doing in Colorado as far as that goes? Any other legal state, I wonder?
I really don't. As far as sobriety of marijuana sobriety while driving, I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Maybe the swab combined with the performance test. I mean, I think it's safe. I would feel, me personally, I would feel most comfortable if people consume cannabis, that they not drive in the next 3 hours, maybe even 6 hours, and then additionally have to pass a performance test or something. But then you get those weird situations where someone might simply be tired. If someone's simply tired, your balance, I know for me, my balance becomes really wobbly when I'm tired. My coordination is off and things like that.
I mean, I guess someone could make the argument that if you still fail the performance test, it doesn't matter what substance you're on, or maybe no substances you're on. You're driving while unable to drive, and maybe that's the bad thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that was an interesting tangent to walk into. That's good. These are the kinds of questions that are going to have to be addressed, and that's important stuff. Harm reduction stuff. Yeah.
What would you expect to see at a garage sale called harm reduction stuff?
A garage sale called harm reduction stuff?
Yeah.
Well, first thing, I guess I would expect to see a lot of posters all around with with every chemical you can conceive of, just like all, and sort of like those cards we got at the Students for Sensible Drug Policy conference.
Yeah.
That give you kind of a rundown. They give you the generic name of a substance, and then they give you the actual chemistry, chemical name. Then it gets into the effects, the positive effects, the desired effects, and the side effects, the overdose symptoms, little clues like, how to use the substance safely if you so decide to use the substance, things like that. What else? Substance testing kits, Narcan.
Yes.
This is an interesting question.
Yeah.
Narcan ought to be there. They ought to have lots of Narcan. And, I don't know, yeah.
I'm thinking water. There'd be water.
Water, yeah, good.
Free and accessible water everywhere.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's one that's overlooked. One thing I took note of at that Students for Sensible Drug Policy conference that I was actually very impressed by was they had earplugs. They had those earplugs
Yeah.
because they had that music, they had all that music that was kind of loud.
Yeah.
And in the spirit of harm reduction, they were handing out free earplugs. They came down with a huge bag, like the size of my chest, just a huge bag.
It was funny because it took a minute, like for the first couple songs, there were no earplugs around.
Yeah.
And as soon as they did the sound check, we realized how loud it was going to be in that room because I forget what hotel we were at. What was it called? But it used to be an old Masonic lodge or something. I forget. The old part of the building used to be this really old building, and so everything was made of marble. Yeah. And the drums, the cymbals were so loud, bouncing off that marble room. And it was astonishing how loud it was. And we were like, oh, wow.
Really? It was. There was nowhere for those vibrations to escape other than like right past us out the door, There was no absorption from the walls and stuff like that.
The group that does a lot of the substance testing stuff, they also hand out earplugs, and they had a booth, and all day at the conference, people were chatting with the Dance Safe people and whatever, and then after the first song or two, I'm sure I was looking around, everybody was like, where are the earplugs? We definitely need them, and then fortunately Dance Safe was there, and so it was like, oh yeah. We do need them, and so they brought down their huge bucket of earplugs and gave them out. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm glad they did that. That was needed. That was very loud. Could have caused some ear damage.
Harm reduction garage sale, which I'm suddenly realizing is something that we should organize.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
There would be people there willing to share their stories, just telling you their stories. Telling you what they know. People of all kinds of diverse opinions. More educational materials, like you said. The posters, I guess that sounds good.
Basically, like the real life heroism, like we mentioned in one episode, where people can just share their experience with whatever drugs they've used in an environment that allows them to do so without fear of being ostracized and stigmatized. Like I understand, the stigma I think has developed as an attempt to deter people from problematic substance use. I think the stigma has evolved in large part to serve as a deterrent. And what we're now learning, through these discussions and just through like our natural evolution, we're learning that now we're on the other side where it's time to sort of allow the stigma to fade and allow the genuine, sincere education now to take precedence.
Yeah, and I think we're getting there. And honestly, I would assume that that's on most people's mind who respond yes to that survey, saying, are you in favor of putting this on the ballot and giving North Dakotans the opportunity to decide for themselves whether or not to obtain or use marijuana? Yeah. I would assume that, not all these people are actually going to do it themselves, but...
Right, there's no way that 78% of North Dakotans are going to use cannabis.
And I mean, who would say that what they want, or like, that everybody should smoke weed?
Yeah.
sometimes the people who are advocating for these things come across that way.
Right, yeah.
So if that's necessarily the right tone to take at all.
No. That can be harmful, yeah. So there, it comes down to tone again, and sincerity.
Right. And so the legalization of these things are going to lead to problems for the sincere community that's supporting it. For example, on 420, on April 20th in San Francisco, they had this big event at the park, at Golden Gate Park, where basically people are celebrating marijuana. But the tone of the event, we talked about before, was just nasty to me. Like, it was a bad tone. Yeah. It was these big marijuana companies with their big ads all over the place, and blatantly all they're trying to do is sell more weed. Mm-hmm. They're not trying to create a mindful, safe, healthy community. They're just trying to, like, make a popular culture out of something so that they could profit on. Weed, it's so cool. You'd be so cool. And, you know, very, like, no mindfulness behind it at all. Simply, like, status symbol, like they might advertise, I don't know. I don't know what to compare it to exactly, but
maybe like how cigarettes used to be marketed back in the day where someone cool, you know, someone was smoking a cigarette and that made them cool.
Yeah, exactly. It looked a lot like that.
Yeah.
And, clearly overruling the health consequences. And although there are much fewer health consequences regarding marijuana than cigarettes, I mean, nobody's dying from cigarettes. Nobody's dying from marijuana the way people died from cigarettes.
Right.
And it's just not necessary, you know? We're all humans. We're all capable of figuring stuff out and being real with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't expect or want people on either side, any side of a topic, a subject, to sacrifice truth just to serve their own ends.
Right.
But that's going to happen, and imagine that is going to happen in North Dakota. So let's say it happens. Recreational marijuana is passed in North Dakota. And, I wonder how long it'll take to actually implement, because we've just seen what's going on with medical.
Yeah, 2 years later, nothing yet.
Yeah. And actually, yeah, we talked about before, but I think that's probably why some people would be in favor of voting yes for
that's a
recreational who 2 years ago wouldn't have.
Right, that's a big part. I mean, people are frustrated, and I think they're seeing this drag that it's been 2 years now, and people are seeing it as a market capitalization, really, and that's part of why. Yes, the fact that it's been 2 years since medical cannabis was legalized and nothing has yet happened is frustrating people and really pushing them to say, like, you know, people need their medicine. People want this implemented. We as a state voted yes to have medical cannabis, so why is our state not yet implementing it? It's
not
almost like
listening to the people.
Yeah, right, not listening to the people. So it's kind of like a slap in the face to the people that it has not yet been implemented, and I think that is really frustrating people. And then also, you know, on top of that, there's been so much more discussion about it because medical was legalized technically. So people are discussing it, and then there's other states that have already done legalization, full legalization and medical legalization, and there hasn't been any crazy news like you know, Colorado hasn't had a big sinkhole and the whole state just fell into the ground. You know, it's not all messed up. Many things have improved. Yeah. We have a sort of a libertarian streak here in North Dakota, a streak of like let us do what we want, and we'll make sure that we don't hurt others, and we don't really need the nanny state telling us what we can and can't do. I personally appreciate the government. I appreciate their role. I appreciate the sort of safety net that they provide in my life and in my place here. But at the same time, we don't need them to be overbearing about anything.
Mm-hmm. You don't know what's good for you, and we're not going to let you even go to a store and pay a psychiatrist to sit with you while you experiment with, say, marijuana.
Yeah.
That's pretty pretty wild.
Hmm.
Pretty wild hand-holding. Not actually hand-holding, but more like imprisonment.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe that's good for us. For the people who want real access to this and they want the stigma to decrease, what if in a world where they had implemented medical marijuana like they promised sooner, but maybe it's like how it is in Minnesota. Like Minnesota has medical marijuana, but I know someone who has a medical marijuana card, an old man with MS who's in lots and lots and lots of horrible pain. And though he has a medical marijuana card, he's a state resident of Minnesota. He is unable to get smokable marijuana. You know, they have all these rules. And yeah, he can only buy like CBD oil basically, and like these other oils that don't really do it.
Yep. And then they try and make like the Marinol is one of those pills that has cannabis extract or something, and it's a clear another example of capitalizing, basically patenting something. They want to be able to patent something that nobody else can produce and sell it, you know, so there's a little bit of that too, and people are just fed up with it. They see like that a pharmaceutical company, for example, wants something that they can patent that nobody else can produce, so they want to make a Marinol pill because nobody else can make a Marinol pill. But anybody can.
More than a dozen states, you can grow your own.
Yeah. Yeah, it costs almost nothing to grow it in your, and that's, people are just fed up with it.
So imagine if we had implemented a medical marijuana thing on time, and that maybe it was kind of a crappy version of real medical as it is in Minnesota. We implement something, and then now here today, recreational marijuana is coming on to the ballot. People may not be willing to vote on if it had gone differently. Imagine if the reason that this hasn't been implemented is because there are people on the side who's opposed to all of this. Said, you know what, okay, they just voted for medical, but let's just drag it out. Let's deliberately not give it to them as long as we can, and let's ruin it. What if that backfired for those people? And now, because that's what happened, now that recreational is a choice, it'll happen. Let's say all of that is true and all that happened. It's a bummer for the people who really don't want it legalized because they allowed insincerity to take hold.
Yep, there you go.
You know, if there was someone on the other side, someone who's trying to get marijuana legalized, you wouldn't want them overlooking anything in the same way, you know, that other hypothetical person I just described overlooked something for their own ends. Because it could backfire. And of course it would. Because sincerity is the only way.
It is. People can sense it. They maybe don't even like cognitively or consciously like know, but they subconsciously can kind of sense it, like that somebody's dragging their feet, somebody's trying to make it about money, somebody's not like looking out for them. So yeah, that's a little bit of food for thought related to cannabis and how it relates to North Dakota and us North Dakotans here. We can change gears a little bit. We can touch on the club, which has been so fruitful to me and has like provided me with so many opportunities and just so much knowledge and just the whole thing, you know. I had never heard the term harm reduction before I met you, Will. I hadn't. Like, I didn't know what it meant. But, you know, thankfully I met you at that class you were speaking in and got into the club and kept coming back and had, like I mentioned, so many things have unfolded. So I am extremely honored to be passing on the torch here now to Mr. Tim, who will be stepping into the presidency for the Psychedelic Club and the Students for Sensible Drug Policy at UND. And it sounds like he's ready to hit the ground with his feet running. Like he's got plans. He knows where he wants to take the club. He's already got like discussions lined up with fraternities and things like that. And he mentioned Specifically, he wants to hit hard on the social media, which is something I never did. I never, like, I mean, in general, I don't do much social media. I don't, like, post much on Facebook or any blogs or anything like that. But he has tons of things lined up as far as that goes. So I think that'll help bring the club and the awareness of harm reduction, like, to the next level, at least here in North Dakota, at least here in Grand Forks, you know?
I'm very glad that Tim is doing his thing. The Tim thing. Because he's very excited, and he's a good communicator.
Yes.
And I think he is down with this whole thing of sincerity, and I think he's a good bridge to people who wouldn't necessarily understand these things, or who don't know what harm reduction is, the same way you didn't really know what it was as a thing. Yeah. It's funny that you said that, because of course you understand the concept of reducing harm in your life, and you knew what that was before you ever heard the phrase harm reduction. Mm-hmm. And everybody knows what that is, and is generally for it. I mean, we could think of some examples. Some people actually don't like seatbelts, I guess.
Yeah.
Some people don't like seatbelt laws. Okay, I wonder if there's a difference between laws that require you to wear a seatbelt and laws that require car companies to install seatbelts.
What do you mean?
On one hand, I guess I could see where somebody would say, to some extent, I can understand how someone would say, I don't want the government requiring me to wear a seatbelt because I don't want them to tell me how to live my life.
Yeah.
But that is, okay, maybe you have a point there, someone. I can give them something. But you can't give that same something to someone who says car companies shouldn't be required to install seatbelts. Because by installing seatbelts, you're giving the person an option. At least you're giving them the option. To give them no option of it at all, and to take all the power of harm reduction out of a person's hands and leave them with just the harm, bummer.
It comes down to providing the option and then providing the education, you know, like, yes, of course, absolutely, you have to provide the option for a seatbelt. And I agree. I think there maybe is some argument that the government doesn't need to be stepping into whether we choose to buckle up or not, on one hand, especially if it's not harming other people.
You know, by not wearing your seatbelt, you are introducing harm to others, even if it's only you who's going to be hurt in the car accident, because there will be expenses associated with your hospital recovery.
Yep. So
that the taxpayers and others will, to some extent, it's going to be some sort of burden of harm placed on someone, even if you're some stranger with no friends who gets in a car accident or something.
Yeah. So in that situation,
maybe that's a weird example, but I guess I'm trying to point out something about at least the laws that require car companies to install seatbelts are going to actually give people the option to keep themselves safe. That's good. Now, not to get off the whole Tim subject so fast.
Yeah.
Not sure how I made that jump, but Tim's gonna be good, and I'm really excited for him. I remember the time he and I spoke in one of the fraternities on campus. It was one of their weekly meetings, and they invited us, the Psychedelic Club, in to just share like a 15-minute conversation with the men in that house. Just explain them what the club does on campus, what sort of services it provides, and what kind of education outreach stuff we do. And we had this chat, and it was just before the election for medical marijuana a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, without just walking in there and sounding like we're just dudes trying to tell you that, you know, you should vote to support weed, because that would come across as not the tone we want to have, right? Mm-hmm. You know, we were able to explain sincerely, objectively, that legalizing medical marijuana would be a harm reduction maneuver.
Yeah.
And so we had this conversation. It was nice, and the men in the house asked questions, and it seemed like it went well. Whatever. We felt respected, and, you know, whatever. We left. But actually, as I was walking out the door, guess who was walking in? None other than Senator John Hoeven.
Yes, I remember.
Maybe we've shared this story on the show before already. We probably have. Anyway, I'm not trying to set up this story like we're against John Hoven in any way.
Right.
But he did go in there to have a similar sort of conversation with the men in the house about, I don't know what else, but one of the things they talked about was the upcoming ballot measures, and one of those was the medical marijuana thing. And I was told by some men in the house later that he had told them his opinion on it, which was not to legalize medical marijuana.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I really doubted myself when I heard all that, and when I let that sink in, and I almost thought, like, what is the point of us going up and down the street if people like the senator, any senator, is going to walk in after you and tell the same people that you're wrong?
Yeah, just discredit you.
Felt really sad and confusing and demoralizing almost when I let that sink in. But then, of course, well, it passed.
Yeah. Fast forward years later, and here we are.
And so then, once it passed, it struck me, well, I am very glad I was walking up and down the street that day.
Yeah.
Especially if people like the senators or just, people who have more influence and general respectability or credibility or whatever that is than you are out there doing the same thing. And so the story kind of flipped for me. And anyway, I totally respected myself, and I still totally respected him for doing the same thing, for walking into a group of people and trying to share your sincere perspective. I was grateful for it all afterwards.
Cool. Yeah, good.
And Tim was with me, and I'm hoping very much that Tim goes to more fraternities. Like we've been talking about doing that while I was a student at UND the last few years, and we only did it a couple times. But I have a feeling he'll be doing it more this year, and I'm really excited for y'all.
Yeah. Yep, he's going to do a great job, and you have done a great job. We all have done a great job. I'm proud of the city, proud of the state. I'm proud of the country. I'm proud of everybody, Everyone is kind of putting in their part and trying to navigate through all the information, and us people doing the harm reduction feels like, to me, like we're making a difference. People, the attitudes are shifting, and people are thinking about things, and even if someone is disagreeing with me, I've had conversations where people disagree with me, and that's just as valuable to me. Maybe not in the moment, it's hard to appreciate those things sometimes, but in retrospect, I value those encounters as well. It provides me the opportunity to grow. It provides me the opportunity to refine my ideas, and sometimes I find myself thinking like, oh, maybe I was a little bit off on this. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah,
it's hard to imagine, like, in any given moment, I think perhaps general people feel like they know what's going on to some extent, or they know how they feel, they know sort of what's right. They generally feel themselves to be in the right.
Yep.
But, think about how many times your mind has changed on certain things. In a short amount of time, really. How many years ago was it I was a senior in high school, or a freshman in high school, or even in 7th grade? Like, really, it wasn't that many years ago. And imagine how many things have changed in my mind since then. Like, an incredible amount. Right. And I don't know. Perhaps, our brains are developing, and we're going through a lot in that time. Perhaps people's minds change less once they hit some sort of plateau of adulthood. Yeah. But perhaps they don't. Perhaps they continue changing. Perhaps they always have the ability to change, the chance of change. And, that was kind of funny. Did you hear that? I just sort of slipped and said, the chance of change instead of change. And,
the Freudian slipper.
Yeah, perhaps change is the opposite of chains. And we must allow ourselves to change, or else we are in chains to something. And so it's hard now, especially as an adult. Like when you're young and you find out something is not how you thought, or you realize you were wrong about something,
Yeah.
It's like maybe it's not so hard to change your mind and to just realize like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna do A or B anymore. I'm gonna be C. But now it's like we're kind of resistant to it. We assume that we've got it all figured out. We don't want to know that we're wrong. But it's okay to be wrong. You know what? I was at the thrift store the other day in G-Funk. I saw this T-shirt. It said Century Elementary. I went to Century Elementary.
Mm-hmm.
And on the T-shirt, it said HERO. It was like an acronym standing for Helping Everyone Respect Others.
Okay.
I was like, wow, that's so cool. And the thing that stuck out to me was the helping part. Because everyone really does need help in understanding things. Like, you don't just know everything when you're born. You need a lot of help before you understand what's right and what's wrong and knowing how to respect yourself and respect others. We had to sing songs about it at Century Elementary.
Yeah.
About respect and memorize what that was. It was a pillar of character. And we need help for that. And so it's okay to need help yourself. And it's okay to offer help to people without condemning them.
Yeah.
And without condemning yourself. So that's along those lines, it's easy to find the sandbagging way and not to throw each other under the bus and to help find the common ground because we're stronger there.
Yeah, let's do it. Once again, that was beautifully said. Let's help everyone respect others and help ourselves and help each other. And let's do this. Let's talk about things and beat the stigma.
I'm down, dude. Let me make a quick announcement to our viewership. Let me apologize for not uploading all of the episodes in recent weeks. If anybody is actually following along on the Sandbagger News YouTube channel and re-listening to all of our episodes, you'd know that we're on like episode week 35 or so. And the reason I don't know the exact number is because since I've been out in the wilderness, I have failed to post several of them, almost like 10 weeks worth maybe now. So I'm behind, and I want to catch up, and I will catch up as soon as I'm out of here, but it might not be till middle of September or so. Anyway, that's a housekeeping note for anyone who cares.
I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. Anyone interested in receiving addiction management services through Face It Together can simply Google the Face It, just type in Face It Together in Google, click on the first link, and reach out to the phone number on there and get yourself some help with addiction management. We'd be happy to help. And you can also find us on Sandbagger News on YouTube. And thanks again, everybody, for tuning in.
Sandbag on!
Sandbag on! Bye, everybody.